Well, hello, Christ United Methodist Church, friends and family. It's Pastor Jeremiah coming to you at this week's Upper Room Devotional. And this week's is titled Resilience and Brokenness and comes to us from Sue Conkle from Wisconsin. And the focus of this topic today is change, which change is hard, adapting to change and dealing with brokenness and sadness specifically as you leave one phase of your life and into another after the loss of somebody dear to you or after a struggle or through any of the things that we face. I mean, as we adapt and change, as we grow and age, or as we start one job and move into another, any change is kind of like a small death. And so whether it's literal death or the dying of what was, moving into something new, it's facing a loss, which oftentimes makes us feel broken, out of order, not functioning the way we ought to. It's tough, especially when you're seeking new growth, and it's difficult for that because growth comes with its own version of change, especially if you're trying to become more healthy or to develop new practices, which Lent invites us into during this season of Lent, to try new things, to give up something so that we can make a new adjustment or change in our lives in general. And the scripture that Sue points us to is there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens, which is Ecclesiastes 3:1, or maybe a Beatles song if you're thinking about it. It's tough. You know, Ecclesiastes as a book is a hard book to read. It's basically the recognition of the pointlessness of this life, that it's all seasons, that we will all suffer and struggle and die, and therefore it is a struggle for each of us to get through it. But at the end of that, Ecclesiastes, it's wisdom literature is what it's called. The end point of that book, if I'm going to superficially label it, is to accept the fact that this world is struggle. There's nothing you can really do to change that. And in fact, coming to terms with that acceptance, or being able to live in that tension of that place of the way you wish things were and the way they are, and recognizing that your attachment to this world is going to get you nothing but grief, that we are instead invited to be those who seek God's kingdom way, something bigger, something greater, something that goes beyond this world, that we put our faith not in the ways of this world, but instead in God's kingdom way, that this is the point of this life. There is beauty, there is celebration, there is joy. There's lots to enjoy and look forward to in this life, and it's a gift from God to live. But if we become so attached to the outcomes of this world, we become so attached to what we've labeled our own personal will or our own happiness or our ability to avoid struggle or trauma, our ability to get our way and to have the nicest things we possibly can and to look nice and to feel nice and to have status and wealth and power and all the things that maybe the world tells us we should seek after to find happiness and joy, we will find that those things won't last. And if we put our faith in those things, we will eventually be left sad, left holding an empty bag, left struggling and wondering what's the point, which is why Ecclesiastes is such a book full of wisdom, or labeled wisdom literature. Because where your heart is, where your treasure is, that's where your heart and soul are also. And if you lay up your stores and your treasures in the things of this world, you will end up being disappointed. But if you put your faith and your trust in God, you put your faith and your hope and your joy rooted in something eternal, it's no longer something that can be taken from you. It's something that is eternal, that will never die, can never be taken from you. Yes, there are seasons. We will go through good times and hard times. We will go through life and death. We will go through birth and new beginnings. And that's good. We're learning, we're growing, we're adjusting, we're changing, we're transforming, and that's always happening. The fact of the matter is that this God that is unchanging has one thing in common with the rest of it, that the unchanging God, the God who is the same yesterday, today, and forever, has done one thing over and over and over. Stay the same while adjusting and changing the narrative for the people to get it, to understand it. God has constantly been shifting and adjusting the message, but without changing who God is. Change is a part that has always happened. Look how much Christianity has changed in 2,000 years. And sometimes we see change and we say, well, it's broken, it's a problem. And you're right, sometimes you can go the wrong direction. But more often than not, change just helps us grow. Being broken helps us heal and become stronger. And if you're honest with yourself, the things that you've overcome to get to where you're at right now, even though you may wish you didn't have to go through them, or you wish that maybe things were different, and maybe you would long for times when things were the way they used to be, you would also, if you're honest, say that you're stronger, you're better for the experiences you've had. You've gained in wisdom, grown in your ability to seek God's face and counsel, especially if you're still listening to this right now. You see how God has taken the things of this life, the seasons of your life that when they were difficult or at their darkest, that God has delivered you to this point. And maybe you're sitting in one of those dark nights of the soul right now. Maybe you're wondering, how much longer, Lord, will I have to sit here? And yet, even then, know that it's not as bad as you imagine it is, even if it's really bad right now. It could always be significantly worse, and it's not as good as you wished it would be. But somewhere you're in the middle of that tension place. And yet God is with you in it. That's the whole point of Jesus. God with us, Emmanuel, breaking into the world, condescending, coming down from heaven to dwell with creation, to take on flesh, to know and intimately be known by us. Say he's been there, he's suffered too, he understands. We don't have a God that's distant and far away that can't understand pain and loss and sorrow and struggle and anxiety and worry. God knows these things. But God also knows that he is with us, can compassionately engage with us, can meet us in our pain and our sorrow and our struggle and say, I'm with you, I love you, it's going to be okay, because we are attached not to the things of this world, but the things of God. And so if you're struggling now, if things seem dark right now, have faith that God is there with you, moving in and through it. Didn't cause this to happen. We exist in a fallen and broken world that's not the way God designed it, but instead that God is getting you through it, is with you in it, and is saying, look to me to find peace and rest and comfort, for I will be there with you. If you're struggling now, know that that won't always be the case. Whether in this life or the life to come, joy is the end result. Who we are is God's. Whose we are is God's. And there's nothing that can take that away from any of us. All we have to do is deal with each and every present moment, the here and now of it all. Will you be alert in this present tension place? And no matter what you face, will you seek God's kingdom way? Not your will on earth be done, but God's will on earth be done. How can you face struggle and worry and anxiety and loss and discomfort without losing hope, without losing faith, and recognizing that love is the end, and the end answer of it all is God's love for us, for you. Let's look a little closer at what Sue had to say. In the winter, I often walk through the woods with my dog. To make paths for us, sometimes I break off branches that are in the way. Most of them snap and easily break off, but some are so resilient that no matter what I do, they bend but don't break. I used to think that I too should never break. I thought I should be so grounded in and sustained by my faith that in any circumstance I could bend without breaking. But then in the spring, I witnessed the broken branches beautifully sprouting new growth. I realized that being resilient is worthwhile, but allowing myself to be broken could have its advantages too. Being pushed into new growth expands my perspective, possibilities, and potential. When I let go of old patterns that no longer serve me, new patterns can take their place. This has been a challenging year. While I have maintained an underlying resilience, I have also experienced moments of great brokenness. Being faithful doesn't always come with clear answers. Maybe there is a time to be resilient and a time to be broken. Perhaps we can employ both resilience and brokenness at the same time. Our spiritual journey just might require both. She is so right. Being broken isn't a problem. Sometimes we think if we're broken, if we're sad, if we're sorrowful, or we're full of worry and anxiety, there's something wrong. And the fact of the matter is, no, there's nothing wrong. Those things are normal parts of life. It's how we grow. It's how we learn. Experiencing this life is a difficulty. It's a struggle and a trial for each of us. But that doesn't mean there's something wrong because you're struggling or doubting or wondering or worrying. Instead, brokenness is okay. Be okay with it. Find comfort in the fact that being broken doesn't mean you stay broken. Resilience is also a part of it. As we're wrestling with brokenness and what we do in the face of our struggles and trials, there's also the fact that we are those who can face those things unafraid because we know who we are and whose we are. That you can face these things. You're not alone. And that goes for you both being in the church or in your families, or you're not alone. It's okay to struggle. It's okay to wonder. It's okay to question, but it's also part of this life to grow and to recognize that you can bend, but don't break. It's okay to wonder. It's okay to ask. It's okay to be angry at God. Don't worry, God can take it. What we do is we have to figure out how we move forward from that, how we live with it, how we wrestle with it, how we face that tension and continue to look at God to get us through all of it. And sometimes when things are broken and you feel like it's a loss, notice how Sue pointed out, those same trees that had broken limbs now have new growth there. As I'm standing here talking to you, I'm standing in this new room behind you. You might not have seen these signs before or know of this paint color. Well, I'm in the new donation room. This room used to be our front office and now is a donation room so that we can pick up things for our ministries and collect things for our community that we serve and have a place to hang up coats, which 60 some years ago when they built this building, they wanted a coat room and it took us this long to get here. Funny how it is that change often kind of reflects back to where we came from and where we're going. What I would like you to know is that these things, though difficult, because we're still living out of boxes and still unpacking things and getting the office back to where it was and still looking for certain things along the way, that those changes are going to be good. We are able to partner better with Nourish, partner better with the community, to have a place for our guests to come to the building to hang their coats, for our congregational members to organize themselves for the ministry and mission of the church, but also to be comfortable and to have a place to grab an umbrella and to just have something nice. And so we met the needs of our people by making some change, by growing. And it looks like in the middle of that we're broken. We moved the desk, we ripped out cabinets, and those things all led to new change. Change is good. It's hard, it's difficult, but it is not the end. It's often a beginning of something new. So I encourage you to, like Sue and with us, to seek out new opportunity for growth, especially now during Lent, to look for ways to grow, to figure out what's